Hey, Vertigo listeners, welcome back to another episode. Thank you for tuning in. And let's talk a little bit about air, healing, and wellness. That's EIR, air, healing, and wellness. If you're not there getting a massage, relaxing, and rejuvenating, sitting in the sauna, or maybe even grabbing a bite at Deja Brew, then what are you doing? Let's go. 5752 U.S. Route 11, Pulaski, New York. That's air, EIR, healing, and wellness. You need to get there. Now on to the episode.
Old school. He looks like a radio man. Yeah, I say that every one of my. I think I mentioned that. Like when I got the headset on, I'm in the zone.
Vertigo Nation, welcome back, and thank you for tuning in. Another episode coming your way. And I've got a familiar voice on the mic across from me. Maddox is back. Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was great to do the first episode with you, but I also thought, not to necessarily do a part two, but to kind of do a continuation of that conversation. A lot of people were interested in that episode. I got a lot of positive feedback, and so I just thought it would be nice to kind of do a follow-up or a continuation.
Feedback surprised me.
Yeah, did it?
I was really surprised by that.
Yeah, man, there was just a lot. Actually, I got to say, overall, this has been such a neat experience because overall, you're always going to get people who have got something negative to say. That's just unfortunate. But overall,
we don't give a fuck about you.
Yeah, right. Overall, the experience has just been so positive, and so many people have had so many good things to say about it. And so, yeah, that is so cool. But yeah, so I thought, we'd do another conversation.
It's about time.
Stuttering. Yeah. So one of the things I was thinking about as I listened back, because I actually listened back to that episode, and we covered a lot of ground, which I thought was incredible. But one of the things going back I wanted to talk about, and I know it's kind of a dark subject, but it impacted me as a kid too. And I really like these conversations where I have some introspect because of my age and living a little bit, and can go back and kind of, I guess, I don't want to say relive, but kind of like think it through a little bit differently now because I have a different framework in mind. And one of those things is, I know that we both experienced in school bullying, you know, and I wondered how much of that impacted your frame of mind when we were talking about the glow up, because you had talked about being in this dark place and you had talked about what it took to kind of climb out of that and the strength that it took to climb out of that. And I identified with that because I think that, for me at least, thinking back about, you know, especially my not middle school, for me, it was elementary school. 4th, 5th, 6th grade were the really tough grades. 7th grade got a little bit better, and then 8th grade was good. I had it, and then 9th grade, you know, so I kind of had these lulls, I guess, but overall, I felt like it was something that impacted me.
I feel like for me, it was consistently all bad.
Yeah.
It all just sucked.
What do you mean?
From elementary to high school, just there wasn't really any ups and downs. It was it wasn't always downs, but it just was all like the same, just negative bullshit. Kids bullying me,
yeah,
calling me fat was like the biggest one. Which, and now that I think about it, I think that only made it worse. You know, like I've done some weight loss. You know, I've been in the gym a lot, but I feel like that didn't happen until after I got out of high school.
Right.
I didn't see any of these kids again. I think what it does is like, because I had watched a video recently on someone talking about laziness, and they say laziness is just, you know, it's not that someone's lazy, they're just unmotivated. Like they just don't have a goal. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Sure. They just don't have anything. And a lot of them, they're, you know, a lot of times people who are lazy are just depressed. And,
you know, I'm going to pause just for a minute, and I don't want to interrupt that thought, but something just clicked for me because I remember one of the things, my dad was a bully in my life, for example.
Same.
And one of the things that he would say a lot is I was lazy. And I think like, where does that come from? So it just sparked that with me. But
Well,
go continue. You know,
and my dad too would always do the same shit. Say I was fat, lazy, yada yada yada. But like, all that does is just keep it going.
yeah,
Just perpetuates it because it's like, well, no matter what I do, I'm it's a lose-lose. So like, what the fuck's the point of doing anything? You know what I mean? And you might think it's more subconscious, but when nothing is uplifting you, you have no motivation to do any better, then you're just gonna stay the same. You know what I mean? And I think that's all like through high school and elementary to graduation, kids called me fat. So it's just like no one ever like looked at me and like uplifted me. No one ever wanted to like see me do better. So I just didn't care. Like it was just more because I was depressed.
I think you're right, because thinking back on it as an adult, it's a weird kind of introspect to have, because I can think back and think about how fearful I was about going to school at certain points, how much I hated. Maybe it was one year, it was the bus ride, because there was one dude on the bus who was just, constantly giving me shit. One year it was, I remember my fourth grade year specifically, and that's crazy how that sticks out in your mind. Like I remember, fourth grade specifically being a grade where I dealt with this person who was just a complete, asshole. As an adult, I can say, but, as a kid, just terrified of this kid, and how that does impact you. I didn't want to go to school. I didn't want to perform my best at school, obviously, because, I wasn't thinking about my spelling test. I was thinking about staying away from this dude. You know what I'm saying?
No, and it definitely creates avoidant behaviors, like really badly. And I think, like, bullying, I think sometimes people need tough love, but there's a difference between that and just being like too harsh. You know what I mean? Bullying really just does the opposite.
Agreed.
It just, like there would be times I didn't want to be seen outside in public. I mean, I still don't. I still have like agoraphobia pretty bad, especially in like Oswego, around like people I know. I hate being seen by people I know. Like dating, I don't. Not that I'm like avoidant of women, but like being bullied so bad by girls, constantly being called fat and just like picked apart, definitely created like an avoidant behavior and just like not like a fear of just like, but I just don't care. You know what I mean? It's just
no, it's crazy. No, it's kind of hard I'm trying so hard to keep my mouth shut on this side, because these are things. All of a sudden, light bulbs are just going off for me because of your introspect. And I guess I didn't realize I definitely, as an adult, have avoidant behavior. 100%. I can call that out on myself. And I've wondered where that has come from. And now it makes a little bit of sense, right? Because of how I was bullied in school, and then how that how that pulls forward.
And I think like why music for me is such a big thing is because it's, to me, what it represents is just being myself and like just unapologetic about it, like just like being able to be creative, because growing up I was always like shushed anytime I like wanted to be like outgoing or creative. I just got pushed right back into my own shell. So right now I'm still combating that. I'm battling that. Like I don't want to be avoidant anymore. You know what I mean? And I feel like you got to resolve that eventually, or else it's just gonna keep getting worse, as life goes on. So, like, I force myself going out in public sometimes, or like I force,
No.
Like remember when I was telling you, like when I was writing like that song or whatever, I just posted a clip of it just to like take that leap of faith, just to like push, because sometimes you just gotta like not give yourself a choice.
No, I hear that. I think sometimes that's the hard part. By being avoidant, we don't go for it. And so in order to really break that cycle, you have to go for it. You have to push yourself to go for it. And I definitely feel that, because, any hobby, I mean, I can use obviously podcasting as an example, but even music, back when I was playing music, like I had to really convince myself hard to like, put it out, let people hear it,
Well, and even like when I started going to the gym, for years I would tell myself, yeah, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to exercise. I'll go tomorrow. Right. I'll go tomorrow. I'll go next week. Tomorrow never came. It was just kind of until I just stopped hesitating and just didn't give myself a choice. They say psychologically, like when you're, like your fight or flight system. Like when you're put in a corner and you don't have a choice, you perform at a much higher rate. Like, you know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, but whether your stress goes up,
when you
cortisol,
stop
different
hesitating,
hormones. Yep.
you excel. So it's just, I try to. I mean, there's still days it's like I still struggle with that. Like yesterday, I was like I was like mastering and mixing and practicing that shit, and I just wanted to throw up listening to this. Like, it just sucked. And then
Self-critical.
and then today I listened to it again. I'm like, man, this shit's kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's like
Right.
it's just imposter
Well, I think-
syndrome and stuff. So
Well, right, which I don't know if you listened to the episode that Mom and I had just done.
she was telling me,
Yeah.
were talking about that. Yeah,
But we talked a lot about imposter syndrome, and honestly, that came up because you had brought it up in your episode, and I wasn't 100% sure how to explain back what it was. I had an idea. I had a very, very, very basic understanding of what it was, and so I ended up going down the rabbit hole and looking it up, and realized realized what it was, and realized also how it impacted me. And it led to this really great discussion between Mom and I, which then we, talked about on the podcast last week. So, yeah, but it's just crazy how all of this stuff how different traumas in one's life can create these responses,
this is imposter syndrome. It's like a fear of being found out, a persistent worry that others will discover that they are not as competent as they appear.
Right.
Even though it's just a perfectionist mentality. It's just because I've always been like that. And then, there's days where I'm just like, I think to myself, like, you're not good enough. You have to do it better.
Mm-hmm.
And then I like music wise, right? Like, I'll listen and be like, oh, these vocals sound like shit when I'm recording and then mixing them. And then I'll listen to like one of my favorite songs and be like, man, these vocals sound like shit too. And they're making good money off it. So it's like, it literally just depends on the day for me, But I also think too, like, and I really, because I've studied like gut health, the connection between your brain and gut health. Anytime my stomach feels like shit, I feel depressed. So, and like I've noticed a huge link between like whenever my stomach hurts or like I'm hungry or something or like I'm dehydrated. Yeah, that's when like the imposter syndrome and that type of shit occurs the most. So,
right. No, that makes sense.
The more I just take care of like diet, health, and stuff, and sleep. Sleep is a huge one. Like I've been losing a lot of sleep recently, so I've been a little not depressed, but just like
you feel like out of step. Mm-hmm. But you think, but going back kind of to the beginning of the conversation, so you think that being bullied in school had led to a lot of those like imposter syndrome and
100%.
Perfectionism, and because I identify with those, and so it makes me wonder to myself, like, geez, I guess, because I think there was a point for me where I had kind of gotten out of that whole thing. By the time I hit high school, things had changed for me dramatically, where I wasn't being bullied, and at that point I was on the wrestling team, and so things had changed. So I guess for me it was that psychology of like, well, it's not happening anymore, but not realizing that there were definite effects that had taken hold because of it was pretty dramatic when it was happening. Like I said, it was it was like the second half of grade school and then 7th grade, So I just think about that. Like, I didn't think about how I must have pulled that forward into my adulthood by some of my behaviors and or actions.
I think that the perfectionist attitude just comes from people constantly making you feel like you're just not good enough no matter what you do. Like, I would see like, kids at school, right? Like the popular preppy guy would make a joke or some shit and everyone would laugh, and then like you'd make the same exact joke and then be like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just like,
I'm going to crack this just so you know. I'm not cracking a beer, it's a little dry in here. I apologize.
It's just like constant, like over and over and over again. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like, when people show their flaws and like they're comfortable and like people accept that, and then like the same shit never happens to you. You know what I mean? It almost like, like for me, it manifests more of like an envious, like almost hateful feeling towards people and like kids I went to school with, just and that I think pushed me into my shell even more, like never feeling like I could just be myself,
Mm-hmm.
completely, because just no matter what, it would be judged, and then I'd go home and then it would be judged too, and it would just, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think like you were saying, your dad, my dad too, is like probably one of my biggest bullies, and
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
so
that's definitely was the first where I was bullied first,
100%. Well, and then it's just like, you know what I mean? Most people kind of have one or the other. Like, so I know a lot of kids that have a great home life and then they get bullied at school, or they have a shit home life and love school.
Mm-hmm.
So they have enough to balance it out. You know what I mean? You have enough good experiences to balance out the bad experiences.
Yeah.
And I just don't feel like I really ever had that. I just felt like I dealt with it on all fronts. So it just pushed me into my own shell, and I just stopped caring.
Jeez, man, fuck, I identify with that. And more than I thought, actually, this conversation is bringing shit up for me that I guess I don't know if I haven't thought about, or I just haven't thought about in a very long time.
No,
but
a lot of shit's coming back to me too right now as we're
Yeah.
speaking.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. Like all of a sudden I'm having these flashback memories of, very much the bullying started at home for sure. So yeah, when I hear you, when you're saying you got it from both sides, yeah, there was no retreat. There was no safe haven from any of it, And that definitely, that's like, diamonds are formed under heat, pressure, and whatnot of millions of years. I mean, it's so obviously pressure and stress creates change, and so why wouldn't the personality then change under that same kind of pressure? And, especially there's no reprieve, there's no let up. Like you said, most people who are abused or bullied at home, they have a reprieve at school. And then if it's school, they have a reprieve at home. But when it's both, you're shit out of luck.
Yeah, no, and I know a lot of kids who dealt with that too, who had shit home and school life too, just like myself, and they became like me, just very goal driven and just spiteful almost.
Mm-hmm.
Not spiteful in like a vengeful way, but just like they're just very motivated people. Like you know what I mean? Very just indomitable people. They want what they want and they don't take less. And that's just the philosophy I carry through life. Like I feel like when you come from nothing, it's so much easier to just throw everything away and just take that leap of faith and shit. You know what I mean? Like, cause I was talking to Carter last night about like kids that quote unquote peaked in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Look at them now. They're still chasing that high of like being the popular kid at school, and it's almost sad. So it's like,
and I think culturally we recognize that too, because I think of so many, especially for my generation, sitcoms that were on television and or movies, Friday Night Lights and, sport movies like that, especially movies that are about either high school or college sports. I feel like there's always that joke about the one father or father figure or coach who's trying to catch their former glory. So we recognize that as a thing, but we don't really talk about it. At least I haven't heard it talked about much outside of.
I just feel like, I look at kids, even kids I went to high school with, like now they're all happy.
Oh, wait. Hey, real quick, Shawnee's calling. Should we fuck with him?
Yeah.
Hey, what's going on?
What are you doing?
Well, you're live on Vertigo right now with Maddox and I.
The podcast.
Yeah, there we go. I just turned the volume.
You live. All right. Well, I'll let you go. I just had a quick question, but you're good.
Oh, do you want to ask it now, or is that now not a good time?
No, it's not a bad time. It's just about the outside playhouse.
Okay. So yeah, I'll call you.
I'll call him in.
All right, sounds good. Talk to you soon. Bye. All right, sorry for that interruption.
No, you're good.
But
no, I've noticed, and like obviously it's not a general like fucking thing, but like from my own observations, I've noticed that kids that peaked in high school, they're living very comfortably. They still have a lot of friends. They still like, you know what I mean? Relationships come easy for them in all forms, like friendships, whatever. But they're just comfortable. They're not exceeding anywhere in life. And that's why I'm almost glad, because growing up in high school, I used to be so fucking like spiteful and hateful. Like, oh, I wish like I was liked, or not even popular. Just I would get so annoyed seeing kids that are just so easily liked. You know what I mean? And just got along with everybody. And I never had that. But at the same exact time, like now, I don't wish it away because like they're not exactly exceeding in anything, and they're just so like I feel like what it is they won't ever come out and say it, but I think it's a fear of being judged. You know what I mean? Any kids that I know that are doing something extracurricular like music or like anything that's just out there, out of the box, they are kind of just like us who got bullied and like, you know what I mean? I never see any of those like peaked in high school kids doing any of that.
Yep.
And I really do think it's because of judgment or fear of judgment. Or they also just don't feel any incentive to do anything else when everything has always worked out for them.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think when it comes to that type of thing, it's a means to an end. It's like there's no incentive to do anything more. And that's like, you know what I mean? Because that's like music. That's always what it's been about for me. It's just like it's a need now. It's not like a dream. It's a need.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't see that happening to people that just kind of grew up very comfortably anymore. Or I mean, at all. Like, I don't know. It's just my own observation.
Yeah.
It's not like a general thing, but
I hear what you're saying. And I think that that's true. I think especially from an arts perspective, I think that a lot of people who are involved in any type, whether it's music, whether it's writing, whether it's dance, whatever, people who are involved in the arts, theater, whatever, because I was that kid in school too, who was, I would play in like the pit orchestra and such because I was a band kid. And I would be playing the pit orchestra for the musicals and things like that. And so, yeah, I think you're right that there's something about music and the arts in general where there's a lot of people who identified over being the misfits or some kind of pain, and so I kind of agree with that. And I think that, I think everybody's experience is a little bit different.
I mean, it's always been like kind of common knowledge, but they've also done studies in like the metal community in particular. And so many of them grew up with trauma and like bullying. So many people of them like in that community were bullied. And I think that's why like metal music is so welcoming and loving out of like any music genre. Like,
it is crazy like in that sense.
Rap fans are kind of at each other's throats over like flows and shit, or like the metal community is so welcoming of everybody and everything. I mean, there's always those douchebags that gatekeep everything, like, ooh, it's not real metal, but like, fuck them, no one cares. But like for the most part, they're so loving and welcoming.
No, I've experienced that too with the shows that we've gone to. And just I too grew up, a metal kid and loved metal and punk rock. And so, yes, I think the community around that music is definitely different. Hip hop is definitely more competitive. That's where all these rap battles come from and whatnot. Metal for sure. Like even when we went to that show up in Syracuse, hear these guys that are just, on playing breakbeats, breakneck speeds, down tuned, like just it's like Black Sabbath, like turned up to like fucking 1,000, man. Like angry, you know what I mean? And it's like, and these guys are just up there. And then they come down and they, guys from the band are actually coming down into the crowd and hanging out with the people and taking. So that's a really cool.
But it's just
vibe like, that you get from that community.
It's just angry music and it's in its expression. Like everyone in that room can come together and just let it out without really saying anything. You know what I mean? It's just, it's just letting that frustration out. It's an expression of that grief in a way. Like, that's what most metal music is. It's just like a lot of it's about bullying or like trauma related shit or just something of that nature.
And that's how you found your kind of place in that community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, And I think that it gives you a voice, That's the cool thing too. It's like, when you were talking about earlier about, being bullied and some of the feelings that come up, it's like the one thing that you just wish came that you see other kids, seems to come so naturally to other kids is having that voice or having that ability to be able to connect. And I think for people who are involved in music and the arts, again, I think some of that connection comes from, whatever it is, whether it's art, literature, so forth, so forth. Or excuse me, music, literature, so forth. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and for so long too, like, because I became so avoidant, I found myself almost living vicariously through other people.
Yeah.
Like, on social media.
Yeah.
And this is why, I mean, social media is a great thing, but it can be depressing because it's like,
Sure.
I would just see all these kids that peaked in high school living, they'd go to parties all the time and like, enjoy the company of people. Like people wanted to hang out with them, and then here I am sitting in my room all day. No one talks to me. Like,
Right.
I'm fucking
Do you think
a
that?
ghost. No one, like, I kind of felt like everyone forgot about me after high school,
Yeah.
and so I would just like be on social media all day and just living vicariously through these people and comparing myself to them.
Do you think though that I wonder this because I very much have done and still do that very behavior where I kind of isolate. But my wonder is we get upset because we aren't hearing from people, but at the same time we isolate ourselves and make it difficult to hear from people. Do you think?
No,
like
100%. We do it to ourselves.
Yeah, and because again, I'm not saying that maybe we couldn't use somebody reaching out at that particular time. But I also think of the way that we behave and the way that we isolate, we don't make that very easy either,
Well, I just think like, people that have grown up so isolated and just so avoidant, like, I mean, it's not always healthy, but like, I think it's such a strength to be comfortable alone because humans are such social creatures. I look at all these, like, I've seen these kids that peaked in high school, go through like depressions where like they also isolate and they like break under pressure. You know what I mean? And it's just because they're just so not used to it. But I have the opposite problem. It's like I want to be social and I want to break that avoidance, but it's like I have such a short like social battery now because it's just like I can't stand people. But it's like at the same time I want to be social. Like
Right.
I don't, you know what I mean? But it's also just finding people, like I said, like these kids that peaked in high school, I used to be so jealous of them. And then like I have gone and hung out with these people like once or twice, and I realized like this fucking sucks. Like I kind of realized like, man, I wouldn't have changed anything because they're very shallow people usually, and not that it's a bad thing, but it's just I don't know. It's still just like chasing that high of being liked in high school.
Yeah.
It's just so like there's no sustenance there. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's just not people I want to even be around. And I realized that after like trying to assimilate myself with people like that, I just kind of realized, man, I wasn't missing anything this entire time.
Right. Yeah, because I think we start to get healthy and some growth starts to happen. And then I think perspective and, we start seeing things. A therapist once put it to me, we start to see things through a different lens.
Mm-hmm.
We start to see things through a different lens. And when that happens, I guess you could look at it the other way too, taking off a lens and seeing things through your own eyes. I guess
Well,
you
and
can either analogy.
One of
I
my
guess.
favorite quotes of all time is oftentimes we suffer more in our imagination than we do in reality.
Oh
And-
yes.
And, you kind of like come to all these conclusions in your own head and then you really like you live it and then you realize you were wrong,
Mhm.
and
Oh yeah.
or
Yeah.
like you were just saying, you just see it through a different lens. And it's, yeah, I mean, it's just, a lot of the things I grew up like being envious of or hating, I ended up realizing like I didn't fucking miss out on anything.
Right. Well, isn't that kind of going back to the imagination thing too, or even just I think imagination or even just self-talk in general really is kind of what it is too. But I think you're right. And isn't that the curse of the perfectionist?
Mhm.
That we get so deep inside our own head and so convincing ourselves that this is the way that other people see things or see us, really being more specific, and that it couldn't be further from the truth, but it's like almost the curse of the perfectionist. Like we just can't let it go. Can't let it go. It's a little OCD, I think, on the same level.
100%. And that's why like music has been so great to me because it's like forcing myself to get out of that, mindset. And I still struggle with it, but it's just like even like posting a couple videos or whatever teasers and then seeing like the feedback I get from like, damn, I've been judging myself way more than anyone else has
Right.
this entire fucking time.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think it's just about getting rid of hesitation and then just living. You know what I mean? So the more you try and plan out your life, the less you live. You know what I mean? You got to just go with the flow sometimes. And I mean, it's hard. I still struggle. You know, that's the curse of imposter syndrome. But
Well,
you just got to take any chance you can to just get out of your own comfort zone. You know what I mean? Just do.
which kind of brings me to a thought that we didn't really complete also in the first time that we had talked. And so, yeah, there's kind of the backstory on like where some of that depression and where some of that where some of those things had come from. But then going forward in the healing journey, one of the areas that we didn't really hit on is spirituality and philosophy. Because for me, god damn, I keep hitting that mic today. I apologize, Virgo Nation, if you keep hearing those bangs. I try to edit them out, but it doesn't always. It's always not. It's always right in the middle of a conversation when I slug the fucking thing. But where was I going with that? So one of the things I was thinking is not necessarily just spirituality, but I think one of the things, and you and I have talked a lot about this, is philosophy. You know, I don't know that people really put as much importance into philosophy too. It's not just because to me philosophy, and you can give me your definition in a second, but for me philosophy is different than spirituality, but equally as important, because philosophy is the framework of how we see things and how we think about things. What's your thought on that?
That's pretty much the same. You know, I mean, because I'm always thinking of like philosophical shit. You know, like absolutes. Not all things are absolute. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's also hard because morality is a spectrum. There's no right or wrong. There's no definite absolute right or wrong. It's just, you know what I mean?
Which that kind of leads down. I've been getting into Stoicism a lot, because Stoicism in my mind helps kind of deal with the absolutes and helps kind of deal with the, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because I don't know.
I love the story of Sisyphus. That's very stoic.
Rolling the stone.
That changed my perspective on life completely. And
how so?
It's just, you know, like the one guaranteed absolute we have in life is that we're gonna die someday. No one's gonna live forever. That is the one guarantee. So, you know, you can either just keep hating everything, or you can make the change. You know, that absolute won't change, but your outlook will, and you'll just be in a better place. You know what I mean? That's what Sisyphus did. The absolute, he was gonna keep fucking rolling.
So yeah, I was gonna say, let's tell Virgo Nation, for those who don't know what Sisyphus is or is doing.
He was like cursed by Zeus or some shit. I think.
Yeah, I don't remember the whole thing of it, but yeah, go ahead.
He was cursed to always roll a boulder up a hill.
And as soon as he gets to the top, it rolls back down, right?
And his philosophy, it was like, instead of hating that, he would look forward to every failure because it was a growth. He would get closer and closer, even though the absolute, which I compared to death for us, is like never getting there. You know, he still would grow every time as a person, every single time. And you know what I mean? So it's not about getting to the top. You know, like it's the cliche thing, but it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, you know? Like, but it's a very true thing. And his mindset changed to just love his suffering. And that's also also a Buddhist thing, that life is suffering. And I read into that, and that also changed my perspective a lot. You know, life is suffering. So I think I said this, and Zach was the one. I didn't realize. I was kind of surprised that he caught on it, and that I got a lot of feedback from saying that. But I think I said the first time, it's like, life is suffering, so suffer. Because he was telling me about that, how that stuck with him. But that's just the Buddhist philosophy. It's just, you know, nothing is going to change. The suffering is good and bad.
It's part of life.
Yeah, it represents life. There's ups and downs. There's, you know, gives and takes. So just like suffering has a bad connotation to it. Like, like a lot of people would think like, oh, that's just agony or something, or like that's just pain or so, but that's not necessarily the full like definition of the word, or at least what I think. I think suffering encompasses all of life, the good and the bad. Suffering from good comes from the fact that it doesn't always last, you know, and but that comes back to the absolute of life, that nothing lasts.
Yeah, and there's so many philosophies on. I had again, I think it was when I was in college, a professor say that one of the things that we can guarantee in life is that we are going to constantly be coming up to and going through storms. Mm-hmm. That is a guarantee. In our life, you are always going to be either just A, coming out of a storm, right? Or B, heading into a storm, or C, you're in the storm. Like, that's it. Those are the only three places that you're ever going to be.
Bring your fucking umbrella.
Right, right. Always have it, right. But it's that whole analogy of like, and that's not meant to be depressing. I think a lot of people
it's how you view it, though.
Right. I think a lot of people get all pessimistic about that, and it's not a pessimistic view, in my opinion. It's very much about understanding that there are phases or seasons to life, and we are continuously going through that, and we can look at it in a glass half full analogy, or we can look at it in a glass half empty.
Well, and I think that's where, like, coming out of high school and like isolating it, like this is where my perspective changed. I used to hate my suffering. You know, I used to hate the things that happened to me and molded me as a person, and then I started looking at it, well, I wouldn't be this way if it weren't for this. You know what I mean? And I think the more and more I learned about psychology and just how we perceive things in general, and like philosophy and stuff, I think even though like at the time when something bad had happened to me and I didn't get that that life lesson, now that in my 20s, if I think about it, I can like look back on it and be like, well, there is a positive to this. So even though it didn't help me back then, it's still helping me now. Right. So I still don't regret anything. I agree. But I think not a lot of people look at life like that, and I think I hope there's a culture change. I think more people should look at life like that. And it's not even just about being positive or negative. It's just being aware.
Right. Well, I think also, too, because we've talked a lot in past episodes about how do we bring about positivity in our life. And I think that you have to sit and think about these things. It just doesn't come. It takes work. And in a lot of ways, it takes more work to bring positivity than it does negativity.
Well, and I hate the people who are like, oh, I only want positive vibes. Like, I reject all negativity and stuff. And I think those people are stunted in a way, because if you aren't facing the hard, cold truths of life, which are the quote unquote negative things, then you're not growing from them. You're not getting positives from them. And if it's only positivity, you're living, it's an ignorance is bliss type of situation. You're only like, putting yourself in a bubble, basically.
Right.
And there's no growth there. There's no forced change. And if you're not changing, then you're not doing anything. I feel like we are put on this planet to evolve. I mean, that's like, think about it. We are always evolving, whether that's like from like something physical or mental. At the end of the day, we gain fortitude from it, and I think that's what human evolution is. Like, we've grown taller.
Yep.
And our diets have changed because Grug 1,000 years ago learned he couldn't only eat protein, or else he'd probably fucking die because he needed carbs or some shit.
Right.
So we have a better evolved sense of hunger or something. You know what I mean? Like, it's just...
No, right. Evolution isn't necessarily... I think a lot of people think evolution means that one species changes into another. And in my...
I think people also think that we're done evolving.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
And that's not true. I mean, think about it. Even in the case of our two generations, my generation is what they call an adaptive generation, because we didn't grow up with the same technology that we have today, obviously, but we were around at its dawn and its breakthrough. So, for example, I didn't have the internet when I was in elementary school, grade school, or junior high even, or even part of high school. But the internet came, I think, around my sophomore year. It became like people had the internet, it existed, but it wasn't in everybody's home, is my point. Like you might have had that one friend who had the internet, or, and then it became more of a commonplace as, so that's what I mean by adaptive. So that's evolution right there. I didn't grow up with that technology, but I adapted to it. You, however, grew up with that technology, but it doesn't mean you're not evolving in different ways because the technology has evolved. So right there is proof, is what I'm saying, like that there's evolution that continues to happen,
Well, and they say like our DNA is just stored memory. It's just we obviously like don't remember it. But like they've already like they've done studies where like a father or something it was never in a kid's life, but still somehow the kid acts and thinks just like him, like a personality.
Oh, sure.
And that's just like,
That's hard coding in the DNA.
no, 100%.
Yeah.
And so that is also like, and I've told mom this, it's always been one of my biggest motivators is having kids. I want to be the healthiest. No one's perfect, but I want to have like the father figure that I didn't have and like have that, well, not a bully,
Right.
but like someone to, I want my kids to,
And that's
grow
evolution
up in a
too.
healthy, exactly. Well, and it's either people, have the same shitty output as their parents did and perpetuate the cycle, or they break out of it,
Right.
and then their kids are healthy. And
Yep.
that's just the way I look at it. That's always been one of my biggest motivators. Watching you, mom, and dad, struggle growing up. I don't want that for my kids. I don't want
Right.
that for myself. So
No,
it
I
was
think
either
that's
I
a great
changed
point.
or I just, completed the cycle. So,
Right.
but I think
Yeah.
that comes from realization. I think, and this is why I kind of love that I'm more isolated and more like contempt from people because I get to think about these things. Because, and I'm always changing. I feel like everyone should always change. I'm not even the same person I was last week. But I'm
Right.
glad for that because, I get to think about things like this and be like, oh, maybe from now on I should start doing something this way instead. Or maybe even try it, or you know what I mean? It's just like never being comfortable. I don't ever want to be comfortable. As
Yep.
dumb as that sounds, I know that's some people's goal, and I don't ever want to be comfortable.
No, I think you're right. I think that
Financially, I want to be comfortable.
Well, right. Yeah. I think it's a good point. What I hear you saying is that you don't want to be comfortable necessarily or sedentary in the mind.
I mean,
you want to be
even-
able to continue to challenge and grow and hopefully become a better version of yourself. Each.
even
time.
recently, like just getting the new job, I have such a different outlook on like financial stuff now that I just struggled and scraped by for the last couple of months.
Right.
Now that I like have this new job and I am more financially comfortable. Like I don't take it for granted, but it was because I forced myself. Like, everyone told me, oh, you leave security. That's so dumb, whatever. But like, I knew at the time I was forcing myself into an uncomfortable state because it was either going to, completely fucking screw me over or it was going to force me to adapt. And I adapted. So I don't think it was a loss at all.
No, I think that we learn. It's all how you look at it. Every situation is the opportunity to learn.
I
and so
knew that throwing away that job, not throwing it away, but like quitting it and going and working like a fast food job, I knew that it was either going to be a sink or swim, and I refused to sink. So, but I also just think that that's just my determination. I knew it was going to force change, and I welcomed that. I didn't fight it.
Yeah.
So, but that's why like I'm glad that I did that. It's actually one of my proudest decisions because now that I am in a better place financially, A, I don't take it for granted. B, I know how to like future proof myself way better now.
Right.
And so I don't regret it. But that was just because I forced myself to change. Because I realized like, yeah, I could stay at this job, make decent money and be comfortable for probably the rest of my life. Or I could take the chance, fall on my ass, and the worst case scenario, I have to go back and be comfortable again, or I could do better.
Right.
Or I could do worse for a little bit and then become better. That's basically what happened.
Again, it's all about how we tackle it, and that's where I think philosophy comes into play. Is how that all ties back, in my opinion, because again, we can have a view of the glass being half empty and then complain, and we've all met those people who complain nothing is good, their jobs suck, relationship sucks. Their whatever, this, their car sucks. And it's like, or you can meet people who, yeah, sure, they've been down on their luck, but they approach things with a much more positive attitude.
Well, I think this comes back like full circle to the beginning of the conversation, like people being lazy. It's not like a lot of them are like a glass half empty type of people. Like they're like, oh well, life fucking sucks, so there's no point in doing anything.
Right.
And then there are people who be like, well, they have goals, so they're more motivated, so they understand like, well, it might suck right now, but if I just continue, even if it's a baby step every day to go towards this goal, it will get better.
Right. So, and that's exactly it. So for those people who struggle and are caught in that cycle of everything sucks, it starts setting goals for yourself. And then all of a sudden you begin to realize that I used to tell people this actually, back when I was a drug and alcohol counselor, it's always a struggle for those first couple of times that you meet with your counselor and whatnot. And it's like, how the hell do I get sober? I've only known one type of lifestyle, right? And I used to tell people, well, we're going to start by setting goals. You're going to have goals for yourself, and then we're going to start working and achieving those goals. Or we're going to start pouring the energy that you used to use to continue to use. We're going to take that energy and we're going to pour it into these goals and how we achieve those goals. And I said, the first goal is, and people would be all ready because they think like your first goal is going to be to, go get your GED, or, these monstrous goals that people have for themselves, which are healthy, but they're not there yet. And I would say, no, you're going to get up tomorrow and you're going to sweep the floor. And they'd look at me dumbfounded. And I'd say, no, I want you to get up tomorrow and I want you to sweep the floor. That's all I want you to do. I want you to sweep the floor. And then they're like, well, what do I do after that? I'm like, we'll talk about it next week. And they'd look at me like I was just like out of my mind. Well, they would come back and I'd say, so how did your first week go? Or even a few days, because some people I saw, multiple times during the week. And they'd be like, well, and for those who actually bought into my crazy, they'd say, well, I got up and I swept the floor. How'd that go? Well, I swept the floor and then I thought, I haven't cleaned my bathroom in a while, so I ended up cleaning the bathroom. And it was like, and then it turned out to be like this most productive day. I'm like, and that's the power of setting goals.
Well, and also
right?
too, when you're giving them like something physical to do, like their body's moving, right? They're
keeps
sweeping.
The mind moving.
Exactly. So that now they have more to think about than just,
Right. But it's crazy how like once you set a small goal like that, and this was always my point to who I was working with, right? I'd say, here's the crazy thing is just setting that one small goal for yourself motivated you to say, well, I'm not going to just sweep the floor. Then I might as well go pick up the trash that I haven't picked up, or I might as well go do this, or I might as well go fold that pile of laundry, or whatever. You know what I mean? It doesn't even need to be a household chore per se, but it's just about the fact that it motivates you to get thinking about what you can complete next, and it starts catching fire.
No, and that's how I pace myself. I always have those big goals, but you have to have those small goals in between to break them up, or else you're just gonna fall flat on your ass. You know what I mean? You have to have those little, like, you have to like have things to stimulate your brain in a way. Like if you have to, it's like metabolism, right? Like you have to keep your metabolism going. That's how you lose the weight, right? But if you just starve yourself all day, yeah, you might like burn a lot of fat, but then the minute you eat again, it's gonna fucking reverse.
Well, because it's a trauma response, your body wants to then hang on to those calories because it's afraid it's not going to get that nourishment again.
Well, and then once you deprive yourself of those like little boosts of energy, and then go for that big goal, like then you'll start like your body will start thinking like, is it even really worth chasing this? But if you just keep it going, small at a time, it's so much easier to just grasp onto. Yeah,
right. It's easier to keep momentum when you've got it. That's the whole law of inertia, right? Not to get scientific, but
no, it is
right. Something in motion will stay in motion. That's inertia. And so it's the same thing with thoughts, right? And I think this is the problem. Negative thoughts will then continue negative thoughts. Positive thoughts will continue positive thoughts. We got to,
because until there's change, nothing will be acted upon.
Yep. Yeah, it's so true, man. And that's where I find philosophy to be very helpful. And it intertwines with spirituality, obviously, because I think we start to find our spiritual self in there somewhere. But philosophy is so important, again, because it's the framework of what we're viewing things through. It's the frame of the window.
No, 100%. And you just gotta, chase your higher power. I mean, like for me, I've always struggled with relationships of all kinds, like with like people. Like I was saying, I've always been
Hmm.
jealous of people like just get like along with everybody so easily. And so because of that, I would just cling on to people that were just not good for me,
Oh
and
yeah.
and it would just suck me down. And but all just because I was afraid to lose them, just to be alone again. But it took me being like, well, fuck it, I'll just be alone. And so, you know what I mean? Like, you just got to take that leap of faith,
Yep.
and I think it just creates fortitude just being alone sometimes. Like, um, I was telling my friend who was dealing with depression, like, he was like partying and going to people, who this is.
Yep.
Um, and then all of a sudden he just focused on his job, stayed home, just focused on like healthy lifestyle habits. And then all of a sudden he's like, he just got a call yesterday from those people he used to hang out with, asking to hang out with. He's like, I don't want anything to do with them. He's like, I'd rather just keep going on my own goals. They just weren't good for me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, because are you part of somebody else's goals, or are you setting and achieving your own
well, and
goals? You know,
not everyone, you know, serves your higher purpose.
right?
They might for a little bit, but maybe not forever. And so that's the thing.
Right.
You just got to learn, like, it's not even about, like, you don't have to be an egotistical asshole and be like, oh, you're not good enough for me. It's more just like, we just don't align as people anymore. And there's nothing, like, it doesn't have to be a spectacle or anything. You know what I mean? Like, I've
Right.
had plenty of friends who just went on completely different paths. We're still cordial. We're still, like, great. We can
Yeah.
talk, but it's just, we're not like, we just don't align as people. And that's like, I feel like a lot of, especially in my generation, it's just more toxic. It's like, oh, well, you don't like me anymore. Well, fuck you. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? It doesn't even have to be like that. It's just like,
No,
well,
no, you're right. No, I think that's one of the things that is so true is people grow apart, and people, places, and things are a huge,
I mean, I'm
are a
gonna sound
huge
like a
impact
hypocrite
on us.
because I used to be like that. I used to be like, well, you don't talk to me anymore. Well, fuck you.
Yep.
I used to be very resentful and hateful for that stuff, and my mindset has been changed completely. I just am like, well, I wish you nothing but the best. you
Yeah.
know?
People change, and we don't know why. Sometimes that's why I think we appreciate the people that we grow with that continue to kind of be in step with us.
And
Appreciate
also learn
that.
to forgive people too.
Oh yeah, that's a good point too.
There's a lot of
That's a good
people
point.
like who do really bad shit to exit your life, and sometimes you got to be like, you know, I don't. It's not even about forgiving them for that. Like, obviously, it doesn't take away from them doing something shitty, but it's like, you know, I'm thankful that I got to experience and that you taught me a life lesson. Now I just want like leave them in peace. And I don't wish anybody anything bad anymore because it's just like I feel like it's just karmic too. If you just
Yeah.
wish people bad, it's just gonna come back on you.
Right.
So
Yep. And I believe in karma in a very simplistic view, right? What I put out there is what I'm going to receive. And so if I am out there just cursing people and cutting people down, then, what am I going to receive in return?
well, also too, it's just like I remember like COVID, especially because we just had nothing better to do. I just argue with people on like TikTok or some shit, like, on
Right.
the internet, and just like
Right.
debate people on stupid shit. And then like when I stopped doing that, there's so much toxicity left in my life. So like it's so true. Like what you put out, you receive. So you know what I mean? So
Right.
it's just like you just gotta. It's just about being better than your suffering too. You just can't stoop down to anyone's level just because they hurt you.
Right.
Or
That's a good point too. Yeah, you got to take the high road.
and also too, it's just like if you really wouldn't want something done to you, just don't fucking do it to someone
Right.
else. Because it's not about like, oh well, they deserve it. No, they probably fucking do. But like if you do that, then it's like Batman's philosophy why he doesn't kill, right? Because if he were to kill a killer, then there's
And
the
he's
number,
also a killer.
then the number of killers in the world doesn't change.
Right.
So
I know it's such a deep philosophy. It's funny how you can get that out of a Batman comic,
Well,
but I've thought,
Batman-
it's funny that you bring that up because
Batman
I've thought about that a
especially.
lot.
Batman especially, I think I'm a superhero nerd, and I think Some are way deeper in psychology than others, but Batman especially, like each of his villains represents a different aspect of the psyche,
Yes.
and um and like its effects, and you know what I mean. And that's where I love Batman. It's probably one of my favorite superheroes, just because of the psychological aspect. I mean, you have to like really read into it and shit. And there's some.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, it gets. I mean, we could nerd out. Like I'm thinking about the Court of Owls because I'm a Batman geek as well.
Like the Court of Owls represents like the unknown for
Yep.
Batman. He thought he knew Gotham, and then all of a sudden here's a fucking high society that knows everything more than he knows, and it was like almost like an ego death for him
Yep.
because he thought he knew everything and he did. You know, Joker represents the unpredictable, like the insanity part. Scarecrow like fears and
Yep.
shit. You know, Bane like physical strength and
Right.
like incompetence in that way. I you could go on forever on this shit, but yeah, I mean, I love reading into that shit and thinking about stuff more. Like I love comic books for that reason. I love characters. I love like superheroes and shit. 'Cause, I mean, you just really have to read into that shit though. Not everyone
Well, yeah,
has
and I
the
think
interest in that, but I just love
right. Well, I think
because it teaches you a lesson. You know,
Yeah. Well, I
even
think
though
it's
it
different.
doesn't say it directly.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, and I think that's the great thing about anything music, literature, comic books, and more specifically, is there's something in there for everybody, right? For the fan who just loves the story, that's awesome. For the fan who loves to get into the psychological component of it, that's awesome. The humor, see, and with music, some people love the lyrics, some people love the guitar work, some people love the drums, like some people love rhythm, some people like catchy hooks, some people like intricacy. You can go on and on and on, but the point of the fact is, we're all connecting over it for different reasons, and I think that's kind of the beauty of it too. Is
So I love music.
You know.
It's like, you know what I mean. The artist might have a meaning of a song that's completely different from what
oh sure,
but that's not the point. It's not about what it actually. It's just how you perceive.
right, and that perception is important, right?
100%. Perception is.
Yep. And again, ties back to that whole view of philosophy. How do we view things? Um, one of the changing things for me actually was the Japanese thought you and I had talked about, where it's like,
Kaizen.
don't ask for a lighter load, ask for broader shoulders. Like,
Oh yeah.
what are we asking for? And I think that is one of the things that challenged me so much too. And my thought was, I was like, you're right. I can continue to complain about how heavy this is, or I can look at this, and it kind of goes into what we've already talked about in the pod so far, but like I can look at the suffering of it, the growth of it, and realize that like maybe what I really need is like just broader shoulders, just the ability to, grant me the ability to take one more step forward, grant me the ability to just, heave this load one more, you know what I mean?
Well,
There's
and-
something that you grow from that as well.
And I love psychology too, because then they even say the more about psychology you know, the less you can, the less you get mad at people for doing, because everyone has like allergic reactions to something, avoidances, or you know what I mean. Like, so something happens, someone might it just automatically have a response to like shut down and do something. You understand it, and you might even look back in times in your life when you did the exact same thing, and then you realize, well, and you didn't know it at the time. Now you know. Now you know. Now that you know and you have that understanding and acceptance, now you can change. You know what I mean? Now
Right.
it's in your hands to change and not do that again,
Right.
or like learn. You know what I mean? History. So, but that's like why I love psychology so much. Even shit that you didn't even think was significant or like made any, had any like real back into anything. Like then you could think about it like 20 years later. Damn. I reacted this purely out of like a like shut down thing, and now I can change that. Now that I know that that's a behavior, now I can change that because I know now I have a choice.
Right.
So
No, it's true, and that's the thing. I love that challenge of thought. I love it. I love to be able to be challenged in thought, because I think that too is what helps us grow. And like I said, perspective is such a thing. Like we started out the conversation and talking about like how we got here and what kind of formed us to get to this spot that we're at, literally sitting across the table from each other here, is how these things were impacted us and how we had to recognize that we were unhealthy to get healthy and it's such an I don't know what the word is. I don't know, but it's such an incredible journey, and it kind of goes back to that whole appreciate the journey, not the destination, which
Yeah,
I
so you
feel
have to
like there's
just-
so many of these cliche things that I find myself using now that I'm like, fuck, I didn't want to use that,
Well, you
but I
also have to
just used it.
You also have to just kill your own ego.
Yeah,
You have to
ego
be-
death is
You have
important.
to be willing to change. You know what I mean? Because there are people, and we all know this. I just think no matter what they do, it's justified in their own.
Yeah.
Like even there's things I look back on now and be like, well, I know I did these things purely out of reaction, and I wish I could go back and change. By the acceptance of knowing, like, shit happens. I did this out of reaction. I didn't know at the time. Now that I know, now I have the choice
Right.
to do this again. But you have to have like the humility that like understand that you're wrong.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Or like,
Oh yeah, accountability is one of those big
100%.
things. Yeah. No, and
You
it
can't just be like, well, yeah, it was justified, so fuck them anyway. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
you have to like,
No, you have to own your stuff. You have to own it.
even if it's small and stupid. I mean, like even shit that like I've had fallings outs with, and realize like I really didn't do anything wrong. But then you could still view anything and look for something like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said this in this tone, even though I wasn't wrong. It might have caused them to do this. You know what I mean? It's a domino.
Yeah.
So
No, it's true.
just
So
be like,
true.
maybe next time I could do this. Don't pick yourself apart, obviously, because that's unhealthy too. But just also like have humility to like understand, like, the most successful people I see in life. Like I was yesterday watching like Gordon Ramsay. I love.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like Gordon Ramsay, even though he's a world-renowned chef, he still enters in like competitions. Like I saw he was like in Ninja or some shit doing some like competition with a bunch of these ladies who are local cooks, and he like placed second. But he was like still learning from these women who are like cooking rice in a way he never saw, and like he was still so happy to place second. Like he still, being a world-renowned chef, was taking the opportunity to learn and realize that he is still nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just not have that. Like that, I love. Like that's why I look up to like people like Gordon Ramsay. Not even 'cause his chef, but just like just his attitude on.
It's yeah. I understand
Even
that.
no matter how successful you are, there's always something and you just have to have that.
It's funny
attitude.
that you bring that up because I think that's a perfect explanation of why I love the band The Grateful Dead so much. Because Jerry Garcia, at least early on in the band's history, talked very much about like the Grateful Dead were supposed to be a representation of nobody is more important or more significant. Like they didn't set out to form a jam band, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like they didn't get out with the idea of like we're just going to play this song for 15 minutes. It was about the idea that you're not more important than me. So if you want to add something to this song that's a flavor of you, then I'm going to accept that. And then if I'm going to do it, you're going to, you know what I mean? There's this acceptance. It's an ebb and flow, right? I accept that you want to play guitar, but I also accept that you accept that I'm going to play my organ, or you know what I'm saying? Like, and it created jam band music, but it came out of this place of not having ego, And so I've always found that very interesting.
It's pretty rare in a band.
Yeah, and I found it very interesting. Well, this was the time of the acid tests, and there was a very different.
They were
This
probably
was
having an ego death every other day.
well, very much so. I mean, if you really want to get into depth about it, it would be a whole conversation on psychedelics because really a lot of that came from the idea of that when they were doing acid on stage together, then that was kind of an ego death, and then from that formed the idea of like, well, Phil Lesh can jam on the bass and be all over the place while I do this noodling over here, and then the drums are in two different times. They're but somehow it ends up all in sync, and it was this really in-depth, free thinking kind of thing that was happening, and it was very specific to that time. But I find it interesting. What I took from it, and for me is the whole idea of like, we get so centered on what I want to do, and we forget that
Well,
there's importance in learning from other people. I guess
and
is
it's
my
funny that you
point.
bring up psychedelics. I don't want to like make the conversation too deep into that, but I still remember like I had an ego death on shrooms, and I was like, what? Fuck. 16.
Mm.
I took like 5 grams for my first ever time taking mushrooms, and anyone that knows anything about mushrooms knows that's like an ego death dose. Don't recommend it. But I think also, like, you know, I mean, even at the age I'm at, I mean, your brain still isn't developed. You're like, what, 25? I'm still developing.
Yeah, for
but
men.
like, but I really, and again, I'm not recommending anything, but I definitely think that me taking mushrooms and having an ego death dose like that changed the trajectory of my life completely as well. Because I think it just, I don't know how to explain it to anybody that hasn't had it, but it's just like you feel, I mean, you picked me up that morning. Like, I felt like Einstein. Like, I just felt like I knew everything, but I learned nothing. Like, I don't know. It just, I think that really was the catalyst to opening up my mind to like so much more like philosophy and shit. Because that's all I did during my trip was just think about shit.
Well, and I feel like there is very much. We're just battling these mics today. We're gonna like, I don't know, man. I agree with you, and I have never done psychedelics ever. However, I've done a lot of reading and research because it is something I find very interesting. And one of the things that I feel I've learned, or at least read across the board, is anybody who's done psychedelics, and I think done them with the intention of learning or growing, especially, has had a positive experience in how they've changed in some way
They've done
from them.
studies
So
that it, like, reforms like neurological pathways.
Yeah.
And it, like, it literally grows your brain. Like, you grow brain cells in new, like, you know, neurological pathways. Like, after taking it, they've done studies. And I mean, obviously, it's not studied like crazy amounts, and I hope it does get more studying. I'm not saying everyone should take shrooms, but I definitely think like it's almost like a good way to like really like break up your mind so it can be rebuilt in a way. Like, because I remember at the time I was kind of a little douchebag. I was 16 years old, so like I was a little fucker, and I did not like have a crazy ego or anything, but I mean I was a teenager, so like definitely did. But I was
Well,
like,
you get that super ego as a teen,
yeah,
where
yeah.
you think you're invincible.
When I
And,
was in high school.
yeah,
and, like,
exactly. So there's things that go along with that
But
in development.
and then like in the matter of 6 hours, I got torn down and then built right back up. And it was honestly one of the most like amazing experiences of my life. It was fucking terrifying, but it was like, once you come out on top of it, it was amazing. I felt so open to everything. I felt, like I really, for that whole 6 hours, all I did was like think about philosophical things, like
Right.
that entire trip. And I felt so like calm and at peace, and just like, I don't know, it's just such a crazy experience. I don't know how to explain it. I mean, obviously everyone's experience is going to be different, but you just got to like, like there's that first phase where like you're dizzy, you want to throw up because that's your body's reaction
Right.
to get it out of your system. So you feel like garbage, and then all of a sudden you just, like, for me, I just laid down in a bed for 6 hours, didn't move like at all, and I just closed my eyes, and because you can't sleep either, by the way. Anyone that knows, you can't sleep on that shit. I just felt like I was floating through space, and all I did was think about things. That was it.
Yeah.
And it was like my mind was like racing at a like light speed, but I could like slow it down to it and think about each individual thing. It was such a weird, it was like a mind fuck basically, but
Right.
it definitely opened up ways of thinking and definitely broke that ego up 100%.
Yeah, which is odd because I mean it's not odd, but it's hearing about it from an interview, like I said, with Jerry Garcia is one thing, and then hearing about a very personal experience with you is another. So I think but it also kind of ties those two thoughts together. That's very much what I had heard. Again, not anything that I've ever experienced, and
I don't think you have to experience it to be aware, or like, I'm just saying I think it's probably an easy way.
Yeah.
Because you don't have a fucking choice.
Well, and
this is what we're talking about, is like when you perform at your best when your back is to the wall and you don't have a fucking choice. That's how we humans have always adapted, is we adapted to survive. So if you don't have a fucking choice, you will adapt or you will die. That's just how the human body works and how the human mind works. So, and I think that's probably why it came so easily with shrooms, and for most people it does, just because you don't have a fucking choice. It's either you go crazy from a 6 hour trip, or you become a fucking, like, I don't know, I felt like a wizard after some shit. Like, I felt so smart. I felt like I knew everything and I learned nothing at the exact same time.
Right.
It was like, you know what I mean? So it's either
It's kind of, you know what, to me, it sounds like...
you go into a psychosis or you gain that mental fortitude. That's
Yep.
really it. You don't have a choice.
It makes me wonder, I guess, how many of the world's religions were really formed off of people tripping balls, really?
Pretty sure most of them.
We could do a whole nother podcast on that, to be honest with you.
I mean, you've heard the burning bush story. What was that?
Oh, yeah.
Christianity, and they think that was an acacia bush or whatever, or acacia tree.
Well, we'll save that for another day. But there's this whole thought in that there's this whole philosophy, and this is pretty wild. And I'm not saying I don't know enough about it. I'd have to research, I guess. So I just want to leave it on that. I'm going to put the thought out there because I started it, but I also want the Vertigo Nation to understand that this isn't anything that I necessarily believe. It's just something that I heard and I found it of interest. And that was that Christianity specifically, but a lot of the world's religions were formed off of the people using psychedelics and then authoring those, trips,
Well, and also too, I mean, I
talking
believe
about what happened.
in spirituality. I believe in energy exchange. I think like mushrooms, especially, they're they grow out of dead bodies. You know what I mean? Like, remember how we were saying like DNA is like their memories passing. Like I think, I mean, even non-psychedelic mushrooms, they have proven that just even like regular like even shiitake mushrooms, like they also help form neural pathways and like you grow brain cells from them and shit. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence. I definitely think it's an energy exchange thing. And
Well, especially because mushrooms are coming, they're a fungus, so their sole purpose in this whole life journey is to help decompose and break down dead things.
I also think ancient humans and stuff, it was more prevalent in their diet as well.
Yeah.
And I think that
Well, sure, they were foraging.
They think like it's a really like good theory that mushrooms are the reason that are like from Neanderthals to now. That's like a huge reason as to why our brains grew so big and just like more developed because of things like mushrooms and other like diet stuff and just other shit.
It is. So before we go down too many more rabbit holes,
this episode's been a little bit of a roller coaster.
No. This has been a great episode. I have loved it.
I
I have loved the ride. I have loved all this stuff. But what's happening now for me is I'm like, well, there's a topic that we could go on, and and so yeah, I'm loving that. But I want to say that I have been extremely appreciative of you coming back on, and
I've been meaning to. I've just been, how it's been.
Yeah,
and stuff.
It's been crazy for you. I know. Like
Hopefully
you talked about getting that. Well, what's that?
I think I'll finally have Sundays off, so like I'll finally be able to like come on way more.
Yeah. Well, and we got to get now that we have the table set up, I think we really do have to work on getting you, Sean, and Zach all here at the same time and really just
That'll be fun.
having it out. Yeah. So I'm going to definitely look to get that scheduled. That'll definitely be a wild ride and fun episode to do. But I appreciate you coming back, man. I appreciate that.
I've been wanting to spend a long time coming.
Yeah. And I just appreciate, the being able to talk a little bit about like the philosophical and those things, because I do think that they have helped change, at least for me, and it sounds like for you also, they've allowed positive change to happen. And I think that's important. And
it's one of my favorite topics to talk about because it's so hard to find people that are open to discussing that type of thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Especially, I mean, I don't think wisdom has an age. You know what I mean? I disagree with that. I don't think we have to respect elders just because they're older. That doesn't necessarily mean they're wiser. But like, I've definitely found it harder to connect. I have found it. I have found people my age to connect with this type of stuff, but it's definitely been harder.
Yeah.
Just, I think. So I'm thankful to talk about this stuff because I love talking about this shit.
Yeah.
I always think about it. And yeah, it's just hard to find people to connect with this
Yeah.
type of thing about.
Yeah, I agree. And so with that, Vertigo Nation, I appreciate you tuning in to another episode, and hope you've enjoyed listening in on our conversation. As always, you are always welcome to leave comments on Spotify. I think you can also do that on Apple, and I know obviously you can do that on YouTube. So feel free to leave comments. You can always email. I've been forgetting to put that out there. You can email me at vertigopod@gmail.com. But also, you can hit me up on social media. You can find me on Instagram, and you can find me on Facebook, and also on TikTok. So there are definitely avenues for you to find and reach out and make comments and or ask questions, or even say, hey, I'd like to come on the show. Always looking for guests, so you can always email me, message me, ask me what the recording schedule is, and get on a show if you would like. Love to have you on. That would be great. Maddox, I appreciate you coming back in for another episode.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, man, it'll be great. And actually, I want to wait before we actually sign off. You're going to come back because you've got music that you're going to release. And so I would like to do kind of a release, podcast where we can kind of talk about your music, because that has been such a huge part of your healing journey. And I know that not every listener is going to understand and or appreciate, but I think to support and kind of just throw some support behind it, I think that you should come on when you're ready to release either your EP or your first track.
It's going to be the next, probably
Okay.
coming out.
All right.
But it'll probably.
Okay. Yeah. So something to look forward to. So again, Vertigo Nation, thank you for tuning in, and I hope this episode kept your head spinning. Take care.